Well, good morning, folks. Today we're talking to an old mate of mine, Glenn Capelli. Glenn and I go back a long way to the 80s. We're talking about leading our best life. Glenn has had impact on hundreds of thousands of people's lives. And today we're going to delve down into Glenn's life, Glenn's thinking, Glenn's brain. Oh boy, just the thought of thinking Glenn's brain. Glenn, welcome to Leading Your Best Life, mate.
Thank you very, very much, Leigh. It's an absolute pleasure to be here, pal.
Mate, we've known each other since the 80s. Your brother Gary and I were in business in the 80s. You were running, you were teaching, you were doing all sorts of things, and you're traveling all over the world. So I want to delve into the journey. But why don't we start with you introducing yourself to our listener, the Glenn Capelli journey. Give us a bit about your background, your journey. Where were you born? What's been the journey so far?
Oh, wonderful. And it's always good to start with acknowledgement and acknowledgement of elders and acknowledgement of the dirt that we came from. And in my case, as it was for my brother and my sister, we're red dirt kids. So the red dirt of Kalgoorlie. And I guess linked to that, both of my grandfathers, Papa and Granddad, Dad's dad, Mum's stepdad, were from the north of Italy and came out from Italy after World War I, before World War II. Were treated horrifically, of course, during World War II here in Australia, even though they were Australian citizens. And I think that instilled in my dad and then very much passed on. So whether it's genes or memes, it was this social justice, giving everybody a fair go for a fair go. And if people are getting stuck in and doing their best, then applaud that and a thumbs up to it. So, and also it did mean everywhere I went in the world, Leigh, and I put on a backpack to leave Australia for 3 months, and pretty well 7 years later I came back. But wherever I was in the world, that there was a big open sky. I needed that big open sky, the starlight of night, the sunshine of day. And if I couldn't find it, if I was caught up in sort of the claustrophobia of some of the cities of Europe or America, I had to head to a coast. I had to find beach, ocean, and open skies. And to this day, I think those things, not only physically, but metaphorically, the starlight, the bigger picture, the stuff that you're about, the sunlight, the reality of what's the next step that you're going to take, and the groundedness, and then the salt water, like you. Let's get into the ocean and let's find that flow. And so, yes, physically and metaphorically, need the big sky, need to get my feet on the ground, and need to get into the ocean.
Right, the red dirt people, the Kalgoorlie people. I mean, really, there's been quite a wave of Kalgoorlie people over the years that have come out of that part of the world. And as you say, I mean, I know my wife's grandparents at one stage, they were living in a tent, I think, during the Depression in Kalgoorlie. And there's yourself, Tom Percy, I mean, another mate of mine, Paul Magiatis, and so much of, let's just take Kalgoorlie, that migrant experience in Kalgoorlie, mining and migrant and tough. Paul Magiatis talks about driving taxis in Kalgoorlie in the 70s was pretty tough going. Some of the stories of some of the stuff that went on there, and it's not that non-tough even now, I'd say.
Well, and of course, in Australia, we sidestep a lot of our history. We don't look at our Indigenous history deep and well enough. And we certainly, if I mention the race riot in Kalgoorlie in 1933, nobody knows what I'm talking about. Yeah. This wasn't taught. There was a bar fight. A chap had thrown a punch at one of the Italian immigrants. He retaliated. And sadly, it was one punch, bang, hit the head. And then the people took to the streets to rally against these Europeans. And Dingo Flats, as it was known, was burnt to the ground. My granddad, Joe, took the family, Dad was about 6 at the time, out into the bush. So they lived in the bush for about 7 or 8 days, got back, saw that most of their friends had had their houses burnt down. Granddad had moved to a sort of a market garden area because he had had a mining accident, lost a finger and lost a thumb, and therefore he wanted to try some things differently. And sadly, and I say sadly because it was then they made the decision that the Italian stuff stayed indoors and not outdoors. So Dad never grew up with language, Italian language. Even though our surname is Capelli, we pretty well tried to behave as if the Italian heritage wasn't there. And then you mentioned the taxi driver, and Granddad, because of the mining accident, he ended up driving a taxi. But then because of his surname, he wasn't allowed to queue up in the taxi ranks during the 1940s, during the war years.
Wow.
But the Americans had their submarine people had to clear their lungs, and they sent them all to Kalgoorlie to clear their lungs. And some of these Americans, of course, were European background. And when they found out that my granddad was driving a taxi, but wasn't allowed to queue in the ranks, they only went with Granddad. So pretty well, the Americans and the Italian Americans of World War II saved Granddad financially, and that thing, you know, to grow up with a strong sense of social justice and be aware that if anyone's been judged on their surname, the colour of their skin, how they dress, it's wrong. You know, the great Robert Zimmerman, the great poet and philosopher Bob Dylan. I've dined with kings and done 1,000 things and never been too impressed. It's how we show up in life. It's how we are in our behaviour that matters. And if I find somebody with an odd surname, I'm interested. I'm curious. Hey, where are you from? What's your heritage? Where's your languages? That opens up wonderful conversations and wonderful learning.
Well, talk about paradigm shift. I hear I'm 67 years of age, and I think all of life I've had a either conscious and subconscious or unconscious bias in regard to India and Indians and Indian food and so on. And you don't realise how you are. Well, what do they call it? Well, it's a bias, isn't it? What do they call it? It's unconscious bias. And it's only in recent times I've been listening to a podcast called Empire, where the Empire, it's two British historians. And it starts off with the East India Company in India and the terrible, terrible things, and how India was essentially, I think, a third or a half the world's GDP back in the 1700s with the textiles, and over time how the Poms through the East India Company raped and pillaged the joint, to the point where there was a massacre in 1857 when there had been an Indian uprising, the Indians saying, we want these Poms out of here, you know, and to put down the uprising, the Poms killed every man over the age of 16 in the city of Delhi. And when you hear the historians talking about the soldiers' diaries and the soldiers saying the screams of the women, seeing their sons, husbands, uncles, fathers, grandfathers being either shot or bayoneted and tortured in many cases, it's so vivid. And as one of my friends, Lavisha, who's in our lifter group, said, you know, these massacres that went on are still living history amongst today. Our grandparents and our grandparents' grandparents talked about this, and right in England right now, half the population is saying, why weren't we taught this in school? And the other half are saying, how dare you bring up this dark history? How dare you put down the empire? And the historians are saying, well, the fact is it happened. You know, do you want to bury it? Can't we learn? And as you say, social justice, can't we learn from it to realize it's just a genetic lottery what the colour of your skin is, let alone what your name is. And lately I've been doing more yoga, and the whole concept of yoga means yoke union, the fact that we are all one. The word namaste, Glenn, I'm sure you're onto it, but the whole concept of namaste comes from the light and love in me to the light and love in you, and to the place where we are both one. I mean, oh my God, what a beautiful thing. It's way more than "G'day, mate, how you going?" You know,
one verse and universe. And also with that, Leigh, you know, I had the absolute honour of presenting throughout India in a variety of cities for the Young Presidents Organisation. And I said to Linda, you just have to come with me. And she was a bit, I'm not too sure about that, because India is heartbreaking. You will see things that break your heart, and it is heart-making. You will experience things that make your heart. And every time I presented, and we were presenting to the business people, and then in the evenings, we would have a family workshop. And there'd be 3 generations. There would be the children, their parents, and their grandparents. And they just so open to learning, so embracing of the learning, so thankful of the educator giving them the learning. It set an example to me, which was just incredible. Best audiences ever. And I'm sure that Italians and Indians are related. You know, it's all the
A lot of hand.
physicality of
Yeah, yeah.
communication.
Yeah, beautiful. Coming back to that, and you've really spent your life as an educator with so many of those messages, Glenn. And I remember you going to America. You did is it called your Super Camp or the Camp America or whatever that was called? But you brought back a lot of great material in and around accelerated learning. Do you want to just touch on some of those experiences and some of those lessons you got in those days? We're talking about people leading their best life, and learning is not just about for children, of course, it's for all ages. So some of those lessons.
Yeah, and just Lindy and I, some years ago through the co-ed organisation with Fred Hyde, we built a school in the south of Bangladesh. And we've got 300 girls and boys who attend that school. And every single day they come to school, they never miss a day. But 100 other kids come as well to queue up at the window in order to learn.
Oh my goodness.
They set a metaphor and an example to us and continue to do so. And they're hungry to learn because they know that learning is important for them, for their family, and save their culture. The accelerative learning, looking at methodologies of how people learn. There were two prongs to this, Leigh. In my hobo years, with my backpack on the back, I lived in a kibbutz learning Hebrew in the north of Israel. My kibbutz was very pro Palestinian, Arab, very pro two-state. Tragedy, what's going on now. But through that, one of the guys told me about American summer camp. So I ended up going to interview to work on American summer camps. And I ended up for 4 summers, eventually having 5 months of the year, working on Blue Star camps in North Carolina. And my brother rings me, and he never rings me. So it's a bigger thing. He rings
Funny about
me,
that.
and he says, you got to come back because I need you to be best man at my wedding, along with a bloke by the name of Leigh Farnell. So got back there, and Gary wanted me also to set up a program, to write a program. He knew what I'd been doing in summer camps and all of that stuff. And I did. I met this wonderful woman being interviewed on a TV program, and the woman happened to be the director of that program, and 3 months later she became a wife. So
well, you obviously learned you learned hypnotherapy in America as well, to hypnotize the poor thing, and she's still hypnotized. It's unbelievable.
No, listen, I'm far more impressive on screen and in writing than what I am in real human being terms. So that convinced her, and I knew I had to get in quick because
she's a looker, all right. You did very well for yourself there.
Now, Lindy and I, 36, 37 years. So it's wonderful. We're a great team. But my life changed, and the program that I'd set up and was running was sort of teaching thinking and learning skills that wasn't happening in those days in schools. And I'd always said to the young people in the program and the parents in their parent evening, you've got to give things a go. In sign language, it's to get stuck in. You rub your hand to get stuck in. I'm going to give this a go. And I'd seen an advertisement in the Daily News, Leigh, for Sir Winston Churchill Study Fellowship.
Which was the afternoon newspaper in Perth at the time, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, no longer here with us. But because I'd always said, I had it there and I'd ripped it out of the paper. I said, no, I've got to give this a go. So I wrote a submission, got to do an interview, and thankfully somehow I received a Churchill Fellowship in 1989 to go back to America and study this thing called neuroscience that nobody had heard of in that time, and the learning methodologies associated with it. And as part of that, I had read about Bobby DePorter setting up Super Camp. So I wrote a letter, can I visit? Yes, you can. This Sir Winston Churchill Fellow opens doors. And you're wanting people every year, so apply. Get out there, people. You've got a good cause where you can bring something back for the value of the community. I met Doug McPhee there. Tony Robbins trained with Bobby DePorte. You know, they're amazing. And then I went to study languages and how languages were being taught, and met Dr. Marion Diamond, Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, the founding researcher of Us at Our Very Best, which he calls flow.
Flow, yes.
All of these things happened, and I was able to apply them to help all young people, all youth, no matter what, to be able to learn. And really it was that there are many lands of smart. There are many ways of learning. And we say, you know, we've got this magic brain. In signing, it's a magic brain. And this magic brain of ours is chock-a-block full of crayons. And every crayon is a talent. You don't just have one or two or a couple, you've got hundreds of them.
Yeah.
And sometimes some of these crayons get damaged. You know, my brother's crayons for reading and writing don't work like other people's do. Sir Richard Branson, Whoopi Goldberg, dyslexic. So sometimes you can sharpen a crayon and other times you get to use different crayons. And my approach was you can use the crayons you're strong with to build up some of the crayons you're not so strong with. And when you look at that model and saying, you know, we've got many forms of intelligence, we've got to go beyond IQ. Now, I'm a member of MENSA, so I can pass an IQ test, but IQ's here and here's intelligence. And the things not so much measured are practical intelligence, emotional intelligence, social intelligence. And all of those factors combined. And in all of them, there are models, there are tools that we can learn for our own backpack of life to carry with us. And that's what we taught to youngsters. And then the parents would say, you've got to come to our schools. And then they'd say, you've got to come to my business. And then that led to, you got to come and it was Leigh Farnell that rang me up and said, listen, I can't present tonight. I'm not feeling well. There's this thing of professional speakers. Cap, can you do something there? And I said, yeah, Leigh, that'd be great. Went along and presented about the many ways of learning in the many lands of smart, and learnt that there was a professional speaking body all over the world. And I wanted some buddies to be able to talk methodology with and share learning with. So that happened. And then 33 countries later, 180 different cities around this planet, I've had the joy of being able to present these messages and this methodology. They know that, you know, find your best crayons and use them to do good for yourself, for others, and for this planet of ours.
Mate, I can say, and I acknowledge you, I mean, if I was the catalyst to help you with national speakers, I do remember those early days, you introducing me to Howard Gardner and the multiple intelligences. I mean, literally every session that I design and run is modeled around those multiple intelligences to you know, the whole concept of, you know, interpersonal, intrapersonal, musical, mathematical, get the body doing something, space. I try and do all of those, which of course when I do my hoax character Morehouse, that brings in even more in terms of emotional and musical. But you with the poetry and the songs, all of, I mean, if we go to 100 presentations tomorrow, particularly in universities at times, people are still doing the chalk and talk or the death by PowerPoint verses, or activating those, you know, 6, 7, 8, whatever he's got in terms of, I know he talks about nature and other things as well. It's such an incredibly powerful model that you introduced to me. And as I say, here we are 30 or 40 goodness years later using. So I acknowledge you for that, because it's really made an incredible difference to what I do, and certainly, you know, the people that we've impacted over those years.
And, you know, one of the great honours, you know, Howard Gardner, Professor Howard Gardner, probably the shyest man I've ever met.
Really?
And it was through the my Churchill Fellowship that opened the doors to Marion Diamond, that opens then to David Perkins, you know, Bob Sternberg's view of intelligence. They were all buddies. And a number of years later, I get to present at the World Thinking Conference. And on that stage as well, there is David Perkins and Professor Howard Gardner.
Wow.
And I bumped into Howard in the corridors. He was lost, and we were able to have a conversation as I helped him find his way to where he needed to find his way to. And I thanked him not just for Frames of Mind, that model of multiple intelligences, but he wrote another book called The Disciplined Mind, and another book about the minds of the future, and talked about the synchronicity, the ability to synchronize, the ability to take a bit of this and a bit of this and a bit of that and contextualize it for that thing that you're in. And so I got to thank him, and I think he was overjoyed that somebody had read all that stuff apart from The Many Lands Are Smart and the multiple intelligences. But what a joy that we, through what we get to do, that we get to bump into, meet. And what I love, and it's something we've taught from my early days when I first went out teaching at Wanneroo Senior High School. It was an environment of celebrate, collaborate. If you saw people with talent, you would celebrate them, and then you would do your best to collaborate with them and learn with them and from them. It wasn't a matter of, oh, they're better than me, compare and compete. I played footy, so compare and compete in a game of footy, yeah. But celebrate, collaborate. And if we're going to create sustainable high performance environments, if we're going to make sure the businesses that we run and the lives that we lead are that sustainable high performance, I think, yes, compare and compete to some extent, but far better model is to celebrate in sign language, and you've got to put everything into it and collaborate. That teamwork aspect, what we're doing. And I know you've modeled that throughout your life, and I think it's a beautiful model to have in our backpack of life.
Absolutely, Mo. Well, so we talk about CBP, collective brain power, that, that all that research that shows, a group of 100 people, if you ask them a question, are far more likely to have the correct answer than any one person in the room. That research that was done where the lecturer, as a bit of a joke, was doing a survey on who do you think is going to win what Academy Awards. And what he found was the group answers, the consensus of the group answers, was always more accurate than any one person's answer. And so, Grant Donovan, one of my business partners from the old days, going, when we have a hierarchy, if you assume the chief exec is the smartest in the place and has all the answers, that's the biggest mistake you can make, versus the smart chief exec going, no, all the answers are in the brains in the organization. And my job is to facilitate and get those answers versus be the guru at the end of the table. What are your thoughts in regard to that?
Group genius would be another way to sum it up. And, how round is your table? David Perkins, how round is your table? How good is your sharing? And it's one of the things we run these days, and have for the last 5 years, twice a year, we run a 5-day program for University of Western Australia and AIM, Australian Institute of Management. And it's rare to spend 5 days with people, but we make sure that there's the round tables, and there are 3 or 4. And one of the early stories is that, one of my friends is a coach of very, very higher order performers, and in Western Australia, the people we would know that linked to the mining industry. And he said, okay, yes, I'll be a mentor, a coach with you, but you first meeting, you've got to come to my place. Oh, I'm a very busy person. Well, we know you're a very busy person, but you got to come to my place. And sat down at the round table in the kitchen and said, is your table at home round or rectangular? And they said, what do you mean? Oh, it's rectangle, yeah. Is your boardroom round or rectangle? Well, it's a rectangle, yeah. And where do you sit? Well, I'm always. And then, hold on. How round is your table? How good is your sharing? And I interviewed Sir Richard Branson on stage for 90 minutes. Richard far prefers to be interviewed than giving a speech because of the dyslexia. And in those days, he didn't really want to be noted as a dyslexic person. Now he's a poster boy for it. But but he said, I said, what's your greatest skill as a leader? And he said, I think it's listening. I listen to people, and when I listen to them, I somehow have the ability to sense talent inside of them that sometimes they don't even know that they've got. And sensing that talent and growing that talent is what it's all about. And I just love that. You know, if beware the person that it's me, I've got all the answers. Beware. But love the environment where we're looking at how can we unearth all of the talent, all of the stories, all the abilities in this room. And boy, once we do that, there's no holding us back.
No, well, that you're talking there about that Jim Collins good to great research, where he showed the research that you work with public companies, because public companies meant they had to put out all of their annual reports and were far more public in what they did versus private companies. And he literally showed that the more times the chief exec had publicly used the word I versus we, the poorer the performing the company was.
Yeah.
The high-performing leader, as you say, is using the word we. It's not me, it's us, it's team. And of course, that's the fact anyway, but where that ego, you mimic the ego, well, I'm at the end of the table and I'm a very busy person. It's like, mate, wake up. In the last few years, again, since COVID, I think Gary was probably the one that got me exposed to Sadhguru, the Indian yogic. And I was saying to someone in a podcast just yesterday, when and Sadhguru says, death is very liberating. When you know you're going to die, then you go, okay, now that being the case, I want to make the most of every day that I have. I want every day to be a beautiful day and, make a positive impact. And so these ego is such a poison or a toxic situation when you're trying to actually get the best out of a team. I'm sure you've had that, whether it be teaching teams, corporate teams, sporting teams, that, well, again, good to great level 5 leadership. One of the key predictors was how humble, how much humility is there in the leader. Would you like to make a comment about that?
Confident humility, I think, is the aim of the game for me. And confidence means that, okay, I might not have the answers, but I'm pretty confident between me and this team around here, we're going to find our way through. And that humility to know that, you're not it. The beauty of learning with and from other human beings. And linked to that, Collins' good to great was quite stunning when he, again, a simple metaphor, maybe 2 pages in the book, how people use the mirror and the window. When things go really well, some people are looking in that mirror and going, I'm a champion. I caused all of that. How good. When things go really badly, they're looking out the window and going, who are we going to blame? Picking a scapegoat. The flip of that, of course, is whenever things go wrong, to make sure you look in that mirror and go, okay, is there any role I've played in this? Is there anything we haven't done? Is there anything in our systems that has set this up? And looking out the window, what a great team I've got. What a magnificent team that have helped to do this. And, a friend of ours, Leigh, the wonderful Andy Donaldson, world marathon swim champion, when it was Brenton Ford that got me in touch with Andy. I'd been interviewed on Brenton's effortless swimming, not about my swimming, but about what we teach in our 5-day program and how it might assist swimming. But and then when Andy's been invited to do a bit more presenting, Brenton said, you got to get in touch with Cap. And I listened to Andy and then I called him, and the turning point of why I would assist him was because he would talk about when we're in the water and we're doing this and and people often come up to me after I presented and they'll say, you mentioned we, who's the we? And I say, well, the we's me and of course Lindy, she might not be on stage, but we run the business together. And if I mention mum and dad, as I probably did, it's them and it's everyone that I honour throughout. It's Howard Gardner, it's Dr. Marion Diamond. It's a we thing. And I asked Andy, I said, okay, you're in the ocean, you're swimming 55 kilometres, no one else is in that ocean with you. And he said, yeah, but Cap, I've got 3 people on the kayaks, I've got 4 people in the boat, I've got a nutritionist, I've got a masseur, I've got every swim coach I had when I was 7, 8 years of age. It's we. And if you look at the letter M and you flipped it, you get a W. So how does me do we? Not we, but we. How does me do us? How do we create us? And that's what I look for in people. How good are they at creating the us and the we? rather than just me, me, me.
Mate, I love that. I mean, you're so clever with all of this stuff, Glenn. Me to we, just flipping the M to the W. How interesting that is. Just so
It's all there for us. It's all there.
it's,
We
it's
just wait
in
and come on, see this,
that's
see
right.
this.
I'm trying to, yeah, what do they call the blinding obvious, the blinding obvious. Talking of swimming, and as I say, Andy's a fantastic guy, and the humility factor there is incredible. And he's about to, I think he was flying out today to do that big 250-kilometer.
Tomorrow lunchtime.
Is it tomorrow lunchtime? Is it okay? Oh, that's what today's Tuesday, isn't it? Okay. So yes, 250 kilometers and raising awareness for oceans, and there's a lot of humility there, isn't there?
And
He's a lovely
it's a
fellow.
team thing. Yeah,
Yeah.
that particular event, and hopefully we'll be seeing the documentaries of it down the track. But 10 people, and it's not a race. It's not one of you will get knocked out after day one, and then it's not I'm a celebrity, get me out of here. This is a team, a collaboration, and these are our lives coming from all different places in the world, linked by this love of ocean and salt water under the banner of the United Nations to raise awareness of why we need healthy oceans and accessible oceans, for the folk who can't walk down to the beach to be able to have access to the beach. So it's just magnificent. And I think it's one of the great things, I've swum in some of that water in Maui, and there were some pretty big waves at times, but 250 clicks, that's pretty good.
Oh yeah. Oh no, and there'll be some fish out there as well. But yes, Hawaii is fantastic. In fact, mate, you just reminded me, I did 2 years in a row, I did conferences staying at the Waikiki Hilton. 1 year was with AMP and 1 year was with BP. And there was one time I was swimming out with a mate of mine that's a water polo bloke from Armidale, New South Wales, and a big turtle swam under me and stayed swimming under me for like 200 or 300 meters. You just go, what is going on here? This is just incredible. Like nature, which again, as we swim at Cottesloe every morning, that whole connection with nature. There's something different happens swimming in the ocean compared to swimming in the pool. There's that whole connection with nature. And of course, you're there. I see the wetsuit down the back. You're swimming at Denmark at Green's Pool each morning.
We've got Greens through to Elephant and back yesterday, which first time in a while the currents allowed me through. And that's one of the humility factors that it teaches you too, that sometimes it's not just about you, but it's about the currents. Yeah, and an interesting thing with Hawaii, I was presenting at a conference and I had 5 other people that I'd involved in this conference. And one of the clients in the audience came up and said, Cap, what would it take to get the 6 of you all to speak at our international conference in Hawaii? And I said, well, being Hawaii, it'll help. And, I don't know how deep your pockets are, but these people are pretty expensive. But I said, but we did have a conversation that we need to get together more often. So if I can convince them that we should get together, and we can get together with us and our partners, and we can all do it in Maui for a week at your conference, we might be able to swing it, and we did, you get to go in front of incredible people, and that is an honor and a joy. You get to collaborate with other people, and sometimes it's that collaboration that then leads to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. We do get to work with a lot of very driven people, the gold medalists and the marathon runners and the climbing Everest. But I've always thought what we learn from that drive, how we can apply it to other things in life and diversity of things in life. And sometimes we don't need another mountain to climb, or not a physical mountain anyway. The physical mountain might be spending more time with your kids, being able to have conversations about some of the tricky things in life with the people you love. We've got to love the challenge and get stuck in. And some of it will be swimming and some of it will be mountain climbing, but it's what we learn from the swim and what we learn from the mountain climb that we can apply to the broader spectrum of leading a happy, healthy life ongoing is what it's all about.
So talking about that leads in beautifully to your daily, weekly, monthly routine in terms of your own rituals, routines for you leading a happy, healthy life. How does your day start? How do you live your life to be the best person you can be?
There's a statement I came across fairly recently, and it's hold your identity lightly. And I kind of like that in many, if we only define ourselves by the position that we've got. But if, I think back, younger Glenn, all he wanted to do was be an AFL footballer or a waffle footballer, and did my knee twice, and that wasn't going to happen. So then there's me, the marathon runner. So do my knee, but I can still run in a straight line as long as I don't have to go sideways. So that identity disappeared after, some time. So I learned that the things you can do that are sustainable, for me, when you can walk, walk. Yeah, and that movement, I need movement for the chemical, and we all need movement for the chemicals in our brain, the chemicals for our heart. And so in each day there would be movement, there'd be walking, and there'll be reading as part of my day, and there will be probably a cryptic crossword somewhere in there, and it may look, when Howard Gardner wrote his Disciplined Mind, it may look like I've got a disciplined mind, but to me it's just the factors on a daily basis that help each day be a pretty joyous day. I start the morning with making a coffee for Lindy, and then we do a quiz together. This thing on my wrist, that's helpful. The data's important in life, or the data or the Fitbit telling us when to move, how much swimming I've got. And for me, variety is the magic key. 20 minutes of swimming's good. 30 minutes some days, 40 minutes other days, a bit of a walk. If I can cycle down to the beach and then walk and then swim, well, that's all good. And where's my conversation time with people? So daily habits, we look at what James Clear called atomic habits, those daily things, to help be as healthy as possible physically and mentally and socially, I think is just vital. And I do that. And I think I would also, there wouldn't be a day go by that I acknowledge the country that I've come from and the genes that I've come from, and what my parents and grandparents went through to be able to help me lead this life. And my mates, one of my best mates, Zhenya Lenda, lives in Tel Aviv, a Ukrainian basketball champion, hates what's going on in his part of the world. At least 3 times a day, the sirens are going off, and there's bomb shelters, and he brings his sister who's in Kiev, and all the horror of that. And, here, we got this. And when you've got this, to make sure you get it. If you've got a backyard and it's got a tree and you can go and sit in there in peace, make sure you do that every day, and remind yourself that, bloody hell, how lucky am I?
And it's fragile. That whole thing around freedom's not free. I mean, they said 1 minute there, Kiev was peaceful, or even Israel was relatively peaceful, and then the whole universe has changed. And therefore, coming back to the social justice, reminding me, in India, the Gandhi and all of the leaders there to try and get independence and social justice. I got a friend going to Vietnam in the next couple of days, and my head spun on itself when we went to Hanoi and saw the downed B-52 in the lake, and they called it the American War, because we grew up with this thing called the Vietnam War and communism, and all of a sudden you find out, actually, they're actually people that just wanted to run their own country. What kind of crime is that? But that's a whole other story. So coming back to you and books, I love asking people, one, what books are you reading? But you've already touched on reading routine. A lot of my work in the past has been NLP. So we say use the right strategy, get the right results. So what is your reading strategy? And again, I know you've done speed reading with Bobby DePorter and other things. So there's how you read the book in terms of the speed reading, but even your habit. Do you have a reading seat? Do you read in bed? Is there a time of day you do it? Give us a bit of a background in terms of how you read.
Well, it's often the chair that's over on that side. I will often sit in, and certainly in each day there will be a half hour where I'll be reading something non-fiction, and then I'll probably finish off with 15 minutes of reading something fiction. If I'm reading in bed, it's a different sort of thing. It's I will normally read a poem or some poetry or something to be sending me off to sleep. And I do encourage all the people in the programs and whenever I'm in front to be reading something that's non-fiction, be reading something that's fiction, and be reading something that's poetry. And if you think, oh, I only ever read autobiographies, well, flip, read some science fiction. So, at the moment, Sarah Moss, The Fell, she's a beautiful writer. So very thin book, and I'll read that for the beauty of how she uses languages. Halfway through that one. Finished Red Side Story, Jasper Fforde. Jasper Fforde is a novelist. People would say it's sort of science fiction, but it's not. He is incredibly witty, and it's a book of philosophy, a future society that's only just a couple of centimeters away from where we are. And you look at somebody like Kurt Vonnegut Jr. in the 1960s writing stuff that he was writing stuff about in a short story that if you were thinking too much on a particular subject, then you got these loud noises that would be sent by the government into your ear and into your brain to disrupt your thinking.
Wow.
Because they wanted everyone to be equal. They didn't want anyone to be smarter than anyone else. So this is 1961. And then we go and invent these smartphones, and people have got the dings and the twings and the beeps and the beeps. And now the research is we're getting a notification, or not me, but we're getting a notification every 5 minutes. 195 of them at least, bing, bing, ping, ping. So as we're doing some thinking, ping. Yeah, so Vonnegut was writing about this before we even knew smartphones. The Anxious Generation, Jonathan Haidt, How the Great Rewiring of Childhood is Causing an Epidemic of Mental Illness. This is a must-read book for anyone who's human. And the novel I'm reading is not, it's based on fact, but a Paragon, Colin McCann, writes beautifully. And this is the two chaps in real life, an Israeli and Israeli Jewish and a Palestinian Arab. And they become the best of mates because what combines them is that their kids got murdered.
Oh, gee.
Yeah. It said, all we're wanting is peace for our families and for the next generations. Now they're copping it. The Israelis copping it from the Israelis as well as the Palestinians. The Palestinians copying it from the Palestinians, but they're finding a way to get that collectivity in the harshest of situations. And that sets another example to me that go, okay, sometimes collaboration and sometimes teamwork's not easy, but boy, if these guys can do it, then let's find the bigger purpose and find our way of doing it. So in some way, all that reading I do, it stretches my brain. So it's a little bit of the how else as well as the how better. And I just love that. Ideas come from me from that. Ideas come from me from the music we listen to. I mean, Ben Leigh wrote a song called I Love Pop Music. It's philosophy we can dance to. There's philosophy in every song, and some of it's pretty harmful philosophy. Any song that's about owning another human being, is not healthy. You don't own me. Wow, yeah, that's a better message coming through. But I can't smile without you. I feel sad when you're sad. I feel down when you're down. This is not a healthy relationship. We got to listen to what goes into our brain and our heart and reframe it, refocus it, and really take in some of the pop philosophy that can open us up to a more curious life.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you certainly stimulate yourself. But I'm thinking some of the journeys you've been on with clients, yes, you do speaking engagements, but I know also in terms of the leadership side of things and the innovation and creativity side of things, you've worked with clients to take them on a journey over a period of time, over a number of months. Do you want to just talk about one or two of those projects, why a client got you in and what you did in a nutshell and what difference it made to the organization? Can you give me an example or two of like a before and after the Glenn Capelli magic?
Well, the beauty of it is sometimes it's a matter of years too. And it could be something as simple as Brisbane Girls Grammar, so a school in Brisbane, and they got me up there because they'd heard me at an education conference and could I workshop the staff? So we workshop the staff. And then they say, listen, we really need this to get through to our year 10s. Could you come back and do the year 10s next year? And then it became the year 7s because they were moving the year 7s into the school. And each year, the staff who hadn't been workshopped by me, I'd do a little workshop with the new staff, do something with the students, and then teachers could invite me into their room, just look at how they teach and offer ideas and possibilities. So that meant they had a pretty confident humility. And one of them, Sally Kelly, a science teacher, she's just a gem. Yeah. Oh, but I could still see possibility. Sally, these girls, they love putting their hand up. They love being the one that's chosen. So instead of them giving the answer to you, get them to pair up or teams of 3 and share what they know. And more collaborative approach. And she would go, yep, that's fantastic. I never thought of that. And then the girls would say things like, oh, I'll see you at rowing tomorrow, Miss Kelly. And so I said to the deputy, your science teacher, Dr. Bruce Addison, I said, Bruce, your science teacher, she's a gem. And I said, she's doing something with the rowing? She said, Glenn, that's Sally Kelly. She's triple Olympic rower for Australia. And the beauty of Sally, well, 2 beauties. She had an aneurysm, and she then had to relearn how to walk and how to talk and do everything. And she said, Cap, I never knew that all that stuff I was learning for the Olympics wasn't about the Olympics. It was the thing that was going to resave my life. And then a couple of months ago, Leigh, she was down paddling with her husband and the 2 boys, paddling out that Greens pool as I'm swimming through to elephants, and you got that teamwork and collaboration. But the Brisbane Girls Grammar went on for 7 or 8 years in a row and still continues as a relationship. Some of the organisations we've gone into, yes, they might hear the messages, but then when they go, okay, we need this to go further and deeper, and we can go in and work with the leadership people or take people at every Unilever. We went into all of their centres, sometimes people starting a shift at 2 o'clock in the morning, and they'd be going in running a 45-minute workshop. And the people on the conveyor belt, Unilever come up with a product and they designed the product to be 1 millimetre too tall for any of their conveyor belts. Now, anyone on the conveyor belt could have told them. And so it's one of the things when we talk with Richard Branson about first to fix, first to know. If somebody spots a problem, they stay with that problem through all the layers until it gets solved at a systems level. And those people up in the balcony need to go, okay, this is important because, well, what happens is, well, that makes sense. And you're giving everybody's an ideas person. Our work with IDEO, everyone's an ideas person.
I'm going to make a note of that.
The people that are doing the more practical jobs will sometimes have the best ideas. How better and how else? So it's when we can unearth that sort of thing, applying it to organisations like Capricorn as they move towards $1 billion turnover, and just unearthing, one of the things Capricorn was doing was contacting their people quite often. They're all in automotive. It might be a spray painting. It might be a panel beater. And fine, they would like to be contacted. But if you're contacted and you've got to down your tools and then answer the phone and they say, oh, it's us here and we're just checking how you're going. No, I'd prefer to be booking business rather than... And so when we unearthed, what's some of the irritations, or one of the irritations, you keep ringing us up. Oh, we thought that was a good thing. No, we've got to put down our and say, okay, then stop doing that, save time, better communication, prove you're listening. And it's never one thing. It's never a silver bullet, but that variety of combinatory factors that gradually just get us improving.
Well, I think you were the one that introduced me to the word Kaizen all those years ago, continuous and never-ending improvement. Again, that's been a central part of my work with clients, whether it be Kaizen of sales systems or Kaizen of leadership systems.
Yeah.
That whole concept of continuous and never-ending improvement is such a beautiful concept. And
because it was a philosophy, it's, we then sort of, some of the organizations turned it into a Super Six model or whatever. But it's a philosophy of life. As you're wandering through life, the Kai looking for the next little tiny correction, the next tiny little improvement, and the Zen gracefully and gently. gracefully and gently looking for these things, knowing not only can we improve our swimming if we do a little bit of this and a little bit, but we can improve this and that. And if we can see somebody else that's doing an improvement and go, hey, mate, that's magic. A thumbs up with a genuine pat on the back, genuine praise for a genuine improvement, boy, it's going to grow and it's going to spread. And so there's always tiny little things that we can do on a daily basis, and we celebrate those tiny little things.
Right.
It's not celebrating the grand final, it's celebrating the tiny little things that get us to the grand final.
Yes, 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 yes. And that's why what I do with people is we have what we call micro projects. It doesn't have to be a big project, but a micro project that moves the dial forward each time. So let me ask you this question, Glenn. What motivates Glenn Capelli and why?
I think I've always been motivated by wanting to teach and wanting to share learning with other human beings. It's almost like a default position for me to go, okay, how can this help another person? And that continues to motivate me. I think, we've shifted environments quite a bit in my life, and usually that's Lindy that stimulates that. So finding our way to new places, and then finding your way in new places, and you get, how do we form friendships? How do we make friendships deep? How do we stay connected to those people that we no longer seeing on a daily basis or a weekly basis? So all of that. But I think, we wrote a song, we being not only Lindy and I, but my mate Keith McDonald, who you'd know well, and Macca, said, let's make each day a progress day. Come on, let's celebrate.
Let's make each day a progress day. Everyone, let's celebrate. Let's celebrate with loving and caring, giving and sharing on this special day.
And that's pretty well the foundation of my day. What can we do today that's going to be a progress day that we can and we can celebrate, and sometimes progress means, just not being as injured as you were the day before, or making a slightly healthier progress in something that you may not be able to fully correct. But it's a mindset that looks for that openness to optimism.
Beautiful, mate. Beautiful. And what does the future look like for Glenn Capelli? If I look a year and 2 and 3 years ahead, what's next for you? What does your future look like?
Well, it's always things are happening by emergence. So I'm not necessarily, I'm going for this goal and going for this goal, but I'd love if I can continue to improve my swimming, swim a little bit deeper and a little bit better and a little bit, and keep doing ocean swimming, and, find some teammates to do that with. What you guys are doing is fantastic. What Brenton Ford's doing. So that's good. It's always good to get a new challenge. I came to the ocean swimming late in life. I returned to writing, and I knew I would. I've always written, but I've returned to writing recently in a writing longhand. I'd gone onto the computer for a while, but writing longhand and just writing reflections. We used to write a piece for the radio every week, and now just writing stuff. And it's not with, here's the aim, here's what it's going to be, and it's just writing it for the sake of the writing it and sharing at the moment. And I know something will happen with that and flow with that. My mate Woodsy and I and Lindy wrote a musical, an 18-song musical called Together. And it's never, ever been on stage. So at some stage, we'll look to get some of that, elements of it, yes, but the whole thing is not yet lived. And that's interesting. Got to have some, as I say, whether they're mini or major projects, you've got to have some things that keep you open to life. And there's enough people down here in the wonderful Denmark region in their 80s and their 90s. They're swimming, they're singing, they're dancing. They set an example of, hey, that'd be good if we could make it that far and still be, blue zone. As healthy as you can be for as long as you can be.
Absolutely, mate. That was a great documentary, wasn't it? Blue Zone, which is social connection, the exercise, all of those wonderful things. Mate, I'm just going to go through some of the things that we've got here. I've gone the collaborative approach, the fair go, the social justice, the sea possibilities, the big open sky, the Bobby DePorter and all that American influence, and Howard Gardner, the many lands of smart, the magic brain, Kaizen. We've all got the crayons, as you say, the me to we, the round table, the progress day, making today a progress day. We've talked about collective brain power, group genius. Everyone's an ideas person. How better, how else? Just so many great ideas there, folks, from Glenn. Glenn, is there anything I haven't covered today that you'd like to cover before we move into the home straight?
Well, good on you for taking notes. You know, always, as you know, I've got bucket loads of journals in my place, and I draw pictures and write the words and everything else. One of the things that happened for me when I was on the kibbutz, and I had the opportunity to learn Hebrew for a year. Wow, you know, I said, I'm not Jewish. Oh, no, we're looking for people, you know. And then 3 weeks later, they said, you're getting a new roommate. And into my room walked a very tall gentleman with a shock of red hair, Eugenia Landa, Ukrainian basketball champion. One of the world's, in fact, he's been awarded with the top award of geophysicists in this planet of ours. Amazing, wonderful man. Had $20 in his pocket. He'd been a refusenik living in Siberia for 4 years before finally being able to get his way to my room. And one day in that room, oh, Glenn, it's so hot. You know, he comes from Siberia. So, you know, it's so hot. We need more of with the aircon thing. We need more of. And I said, oh, more of, one of the great Ukrainian philosophers. And then it struck me, yes, more of. You know, there's some things I need to do more of to improve my swimming stroke. But then, of course, you got the brother less of. And often it's more less of than more of, you know, less of this, and it allow the space for more of that. And to get less of, sometimes we need to get rid of. So for years, I taught my Ukrainian friends more of, less of, rid of. And then as we started to be more innovative, we got the cousin, toss in. What new things are you going to toss into the book? And then we got instead of. And my Russian friends, presenting to them from former Russian countries, we're in Rio de Janeiro. The Rolling Stones are setting up to play on the beach. And I said, instead of, I said, she is the friend of the cousin. They said, if it's a she has to be instead of a. You've got to finish with a. Right. So instead of you know, instead of calling the blueberry bar a blueberry bar at Carmen's, which wasn't selling, all they did is change it to superfood bar and tripled their sales. So instead of I have to, I get to. Instead of, you know, all of the little tweaks we can do with our languaging that you're talking about with NLP, instead of, oh, I've got to do that, hey, I get to do that. So those they live on in many, many things, but they only, for me, if I teach it, I've got to live it myself. So more of, less of, rid of, toss in, and instead of. And, you know, I still communicate with my mate, Zhenya, often, and his kids, and he's now a grandfather. And the wisdom of a man that's gone through that much. And his daughter, Annie, happens to be swimming 4 kilometres twice a week in the Mediterranean, Leigh. And we might even one day get to swim the Sea of Galilee. Who knows?
Well, you imagine it, dream it, plan it, do it. That's beautiful, mate. Talk about Glenn Capelli, more of, less of, rid of, instead of. The fact that we could talk for hours, Glenn. It really is a pleasure talking to you, mate. We want to share messages and help people lead their best life. There's so many great ideas you've put there, mate. I really appreciate your time, and we look forward to sharing this far and wide so people in the world get more of Glenn Capelli. So, Glenn, how do people get in contact with you?
In today's world, probably the best thing is through LinkedIn.
Okay.
LinkedIn, Glenn Capelli. Glenn's got 2 N's. And find me there and connect. We've had a website for decades, but we're gradually slowing down what we do, and people can find their way to us through means like LinkedIn. Then it gives us a chance to say yep to some of the things that they ask that we might be able to present on. Great, mate. Well, what I'll do is I'll put the link to your LinkedIn
in the notes, and let's share this with people so they know how to get in contact with you.
Magic. Thank you very much, Leigh. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, mate.
Oh, thank you. And of course, Leigh, Farnell, you got an L, you got an F, and there's an I and an E in there. You get life in somewhere there. So, and we're just filing things for life. If you flip that, it goes on and on and on. A pleasure, mate. Good on you.
Mate, namaste. Thank you.